Hello, everybody. This is Greer from the Hellerwork newsletter, and I'm so pleased to have with us Kay Hogan. So if you don't know Kay, she is a certified Heller worker, an Alexander teacher, and a natural vision educator. She has a master's degree in education and counseling and specializes in codependency and addictions recovery. She has multifaceted training in various forms of massage, including shiatsu and foot reflexology. She's also studied Tai Chi, neurokinesiology, early developmental reflexes and movement, the DART procedures, natural vision re-education, and brain gym, which we will talk about. She has linked movement with the brain and the senses, in particular to vision, and has created her own style of work called the Vestibular Sensing System. And she's so graciously given me a sneak peek to her upcoming book, Upright, Changing Our Thinking About How We Stand Up and Move. So, Kay, thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Greer.
This is exciting.
And I love talking about this stuff. So
Me too. I can't wait. So to
okay.
start us off, you've coined the term vestibular sensing system. What is that?
That's a good first question. And I'm going to shut the door because I hear someone coming in.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to shut the door. Sorry about that.
Oh yeah.
When I teach my students, I talk a lot about the vestibular system. And originally I would talk about the vestibular system, and what I would say is, if you've ever even heard the word, what you think about is the ear. And also, yeah, in the medical profession, they talk about vestibular, and they're always talking not even about the whole ear, they're talking about a portion of the ear. So then I would say, so when I talk about vestibular system, the key word is system, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this, and then I would define it for people. And so when I first started working on the book, a friend of mine said, you can't keep saying that. You can't keep saying, that vestibular, but not what how the medical people define it. So that I had to name it. And so I finally named it the Vestibular Sensing System. But how we stand up is through our senses and through the vestibular sensing system, which is, so the eyes are probably the most important part of the vestibular system. I'm going to define the vestibular system now. So the eyes, because we're more visual probably than anything else. And then the second part of the vestibular system is the ears, audio, how we hear. And I don't mean the two parts of the ear, I mean the whole ear through the vibrations of the ear. And the ears and the eyes communicate together through the optic and audio nerve behind the brainstem. So they're working together. And then what's the largest organ in your body? It's the skin. And so the skin is part of the vestibular sensing system, which means that in our skin, all through our skin, we have sensors. Right now, it's telling you that you're sitting, how you're sitting. It's telling you how comfortable you are. It's telling you whether it's too hot, too cold, if there's some. So it's amazing. We get an amazing amount of information through our skin, but we get the largest amount of information because of the hands and feet having the largest numbers of sensors on them. We get the largest number through the hands and the feet. And the ones on the hands directly connect to the motor cortex of the brain, but the ones on the feet directly connect to the visual cortex. So and that's also how we refer to proprioception. So when your hands are down, it's for balance, and it also gives us information about where we are in space. And the feet directly connect to the visual cortex, which is why we don't have to look down to walk. So then we've got the eyes, we've got the ears, we have the skin, we have the hands and feet, and then the joints. And so the joints are constantly feeding us back information. And in most people, you've cut off some kind of joint. It has stopped registering in the brain. And so that's why we have problems with knees and hips and things like that. And so when you put all those things together, That's what gives us our balance, and that's what keeps, or should give us our balance and keeps us upright. And Alexander had a thing called false sensory awareness, and he meant sensory. So when one of those systems are off, it starts to throw the whole structure off, even though different parts of the vestibular sensing system actually make up for each other. So, I mean, if you were blind, you could still walk, you could still sit, because the ear takes over. And if you read a lot of brain technology, you'll see how that works. Did I say too much?
No, not at all. I think that's great. I think it's a great baseline and gets people interested and excited, because you just really deep dive into the book and each of these sections, especially bringing in some of your other trainings as well, because you specifically did get trained in reflexes, the Tomitis method, dark procedures, and I was thinking that would be a great way to, if you could deep dive a little deeper on what drew you to those things and what they are and why they are important.
Well, my vestibular system was off, and I had read about the Tomitis method, which is a retraining for the ear, and I had always wanted to do that. And so after I finished my Alexander training, I discovered that in Lafayette, California, there was a Tomitis center. And so, and it's kind of interesting, because I'm usually really interested in knowing how everything works. And when I actually went in to have the Tomitis method for myself, to get myself straightened out, I really didn't want to know how it worked. I just wanted to go in and do it and get my results and get out. And but the way things worked out is I ended up training in the Tomitis method through Dr. Ron Minson, who he uses the Tomitis method, but it's somewhat different. But he studied with Tomitis, and it's basically the principles, and ended up having a listening center in Concord, California. So during that time, I learned a lot about how the ear works. And I studied, and at the same time, I was doing natural vision education, because I had been losing my close vision, and I knew I didn't need to do that. And I was looking for a Bates teacher, and a friend of mine who's an Alexander teacher called me and said, there's this Alexander teacher, and he's teaching natural vision work, and I just want to sign me up. So I was studying the visual work while I was also working with people in an auditory sense. And one of the occupational therapists that was in our group, when she went back to work with her young students, children who had learning disabilities and other problems, said that the thing that worked the best was doing the audio with the vision, and that we got the best results with these kids. And so I really heard that and started integrating different things. But at the same time, I was studying brain gym. And at the end of the day, this is all brain work. I mean, the senses work through the brain. And it's like, so I read as much brain technology as I could. And I list a couple of like really good books that I think are worth reading if you're interested in brain technology. But if you're interested in the senses and you're interested in the reflexes, you really want to read as much brain technology as you can. And there have been a lot of new discoveries, and one of I can't actually remember this, but actually some of it I got from a recent book called What Owls Know, because they've been studying owls and how they use their senses and their brains. So, but I would really recommend that book, What Owls Know. And so I just kept working with, I started using the natural vision work with the Alexander technique. And then because I had studied the reflexes, I started to see how they all integrated together, but it's how we stand up, it's how we move. And when you're looking at children and their first movements, what they're doing is they're developing the muscles, yes, especially the flexor muscles, but what they're really doing is developing their vision. So I found that if I took people back through those movements that babies and young children go through to develop vision, that it really worked well with the natural vision work.
Now you really, I really liked, I think it might be the why, your curiosity of the why, but you brought in a lot of books, information, studies to support. And one of the most interesting ones that I thought was when you were, I think it talked about the crawling
Yes.
and that association with skills in writing. Is that right?
Yeah, it actually is, because a lot of the work that I studied through Brain Gym was to help kids who had learning disabilities. And some of it for these kids is eye tracking,
Mm-hmm.
but also it's eye tracking and the movement of leading with the head
Mm-hmm.
and balancing the audio with the visual, and then just like Alexander, going forward and up. And a lot of these movements, when you put a child on a balance board and have them bounce balls and eye track them and get the beat of this is the ball of Isaacs, and then you sit them down and have them go back over the same learning, they do better. They test better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's yeah. So the balance board would be that they have there's something that they're working on in the background. These
Mm-hmm.
kids usually need two kinds of movements going on at the same time. Then they're bouncing balls to a rhythm, and then they're eye tracking while they do it. So you get the eye tracking, you get the sound from the bounce of the ball, the rhythm, and then they're on a balance board, and it improves their studies.
That's amazing.
I know, it really. Yeah, and I tell you, I took ball of physics and I really, really enjoyed it. If there's anybody around you who's doing that, give it a try, because it's just fabulous. I worked with another woman and we taught it a little bit, and experimentally, really. And so like neither one of us were going to become ball of physics teachers, but we experimented with it and got really good results.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, one of my favorite Ida Rolf quotes was the strength that you need doesn't come from effort. The strength that you need comes from ease.
Yes.
And I found another favorite strength quote in your book. Strength is very misunderstood concept. Strength comes not from repetitive movements, but from the coordination of the whole structure through the retina, with muscles exploding instead of imploding.
Yeah, that's a very Alexander idea. It's a very Alexander idea. But so hang on. I had a little brain burp there. It's really hard to talk to people about strength. They want to go out and they want to lift weights and things like that. And if you're doing those kinds of exercises, now I'm talking about exercises instead of movements, with a failed structure, meaning that you're pulling in on yourself instead of lengthening and widening, then ultimately you're hurting yourself. You're not making yourself stronger. I've never seen that work. But people really don't want to hear about that. They really don't like that idea. And so I come up against a lot of pushback on that one. And yet I find that when someone is coordinated, that they move completely different, that's when they're really strong, and you can't push them off their base. It's not only is it an Alexander idea, but it comes from the martial arts. Anybody who really understands the martial arts, not like just people who have taken courses and teach, but someone who really understands how to teach movement and then takes people into the martial arts. You'll see that they're very centered and everything moves. So it's very hard to move them once they've settled in. And actually, one of those quotes came from a golf book that I read. And he studied Alexander, and then he taught golf. And, just bashing away at a ball will get you nothing. Well, sometimes it gets you a little bit, so it's encouraging. But when you understand how to coordinate the structure in such a way that you can swing from the whole structure, just like when you watch people who, professionals who batters, they're using their whole structure in that movement. And it's very different than just swinging off from the arms or shortening and tightening and pulling in. If you look at most of those, if you look at the sports section on any of the papers and you look at the pictures that are taken there, and you see the kind of extension and lengthening and widening that these people get, but we're talking about someone who's going to take a ball outside of a stadium. They're going to hit a ball outside of a stadium. You'll see how coordinated they are, and that when they have good eye-hand coordination and they hit the end of a bat, that they can send a ball all the way. That's strength. Yeah. And so I really try and get people away from, well, what I really try and do is get people to take lessons and understand how to use themselves differently. And then if you want to go do any kind of exercise, it's a very different experience, including yoga. I know.
So when you say that it all comes through the retina, like when you were describing it, it
Right.
felt very much like our session 10 of using the whole body and coordination.
Yes.
But in my training, at least, I don't remember as much of how the eyes come into play. And so I'm wondering if you can talk more about the importance of the eyes.
I can absolutely talk about that. I wished I had started out with it, but it's peripheral vision. And once you lose your peripheral vision, you get your peripheral vision through the retina of the eye. And once you start losing peripheral vision, which means this happens. So when you see people lose peripheral vision, the head comes forward and they collapse in the front. And then what they're going to try and do is stand up from here, when you really have to come up from here and stay in peripheral vision. And then there's a thing called panoramic vision, which gets you up even better, but it's also where our balance comes from. So when you think about Alexander work and natural vision work, you're talking about neck-head relationship. And I always thought it was so interesting that Ida Rolf said, the neck tells the story of the whole man. And she was absolutely right. And I think Alexander teachers, this is a big opinion, so I have to be really careful with this, but I just think they need to go up higher. And the whole third back of the brain is for vision. That's your visual cortex. So if you're not starting from up here, then you're not going to get what you want below. And the way you have to do that is through the eyes. And so we go into, I teach people how to regain their peripheral vision and how to work the visual pathway, and it excites the visual cortex. And then Alexander said you have to lengthen and widen the whole back. Well, the whole back isn't here, it starts here. And so if you're not including the visual cortex and peripheral vision and panoramic vision, then you're not going to get as good a result as you could. Is that helpful? Did that?
Yeah. I think that's fascinating. And I really like to, because you've studied so much of early development.
Yes.
And you even talk about developing some of these senses, for example, the auditory and the use of the sucking in the mouth, like in utero,
right.
The birthing process, and some of those first movements with children and how important that is.
Right.
And I was wondering, if you could share a little bit more about that, because I found that really interesting. And again, you kind of touched on it before, but why you bring that back, some of those first movements with adult clients, and why that's important.
Well, it's interesting because I had a client yesterday and I was interviewing her, and I always ask about the birthing process. And in utero, the baby has all of these movements that it goes through if things are going well, and they do movements that they won't do again until much later. They don't come out, but they rehearse them in the womb. I have a fabulous CD of them doing things like pincer movements. They open and close the eyes. Sometimes they'll suck. They actually suck and will suck the top of the uterus and things like that. And then the birthing process is so important to development of the structure, because how they come through hopefully they come through the vaginal canal, and this twisting and turning not only does it release hormones, but it also starts the development of the muscles and the structure. And nowadays we just, I think they're too quick to do cesareans, and it doesn't mean the kids won't catch up. It's just, it's slower for them. Healthy kids usually will catch up over time, but they're not going to come out with the same, they won't be the same as the kids who come through the birthing canal and have the rotation of the head and so forth when they come out. And and then the movements that they do early on, it's pretty interesting to me. During the summer, I worked on two people, someone who grew up in Moscow and someone who grew up in China. And this woman who grew up in China has this gorgeous torso. And her fiance, who grew up in Moscow in a very Western situation, the difference was one had baby furniture and one didn't. So the kids who are left on the floor, who are left to their own, and the kids who end up in our style of baby furniture and things like that they get a different result by the time that they're adults. It's really interesting to see the torso. You don't see torsos much on Western people. I don't even know how to explain that at the moment, other than if I had a picture, I could show you the difference. And so kids, infants, if you leave them to their own, have a whole set of movements that they go through. There are names for most of these infant reflexes, because we're designed to move in rotation. And so they do it mainly through rotation, but the reason they move is to see more. So they're developing their vision. They're looking up, and they're looking up, and then they're looking down, and they're looking up. And what are they doing? They're developing their close far vision. But not only are they developing their close far vision, but they're also getting the flexor muscles in the front to develop, so that then they can crawl forward. And then from the crawling forward, they don't actually stand up, they actually crawl up something, and now they're standing. And so, I've had people send me pictures of their children who they're having problems in the walking phase, and it's like, oh my gosh, stop trying to help them. Just leave them alone. Let them be on the floor and let them work that out, because they really need to work that out for themselves. And then also get them away from a lot of these jump seats and things like that. Some of it's good. The rocking is really important. Rotating, all of, that kind of thing. And then put them in slings, keep the whole back rounded, these upright. But if I start talking about the things that I see in our culture and baby furniture and shoes like that, we'll just plan to be here for the rest of the day. But honestly, the easiest thing to do is to leave, just basically leave them alone and let them work those things out. So again, when I realized that what they were doing was working out their vision, Dr. Raymond Dart said the only reason we ever stood up was to see more. And so that's what they're doing. They're looking and they're trying to find, and they love motion and they love color, and they will follow that. And then the body follows what they're seeing, which is interesting. So if I want something that's up there, I'm going to crawl up there and get it. Next thing you know, they're up. And so that's what's happening through the reflexes. And I found that if I took my I take all of my students back through some of those early developmental movements, but then I also can see how the whole body is designed to move in rotation. And so it helps people to get back the rotations that they've lost in their own structure, and anything that will rotate will go up, right? So here we are, we're going up. And the neck was never, I probably say this all over the book. I can't stand to read my book anymore because it took, I had to read it so much when I edited it. But the neck was never designed to turn the head. And I always say that twice with all of both my students and my clients. And it's from the Atlantic occipital joint through vision. So my eyes go, then my face goes. And then if I don't tighten into this structure, it's just designed to go up, to rotate, to go up. But then that would completely take me up. But if I'm down here trying to do something down here, I'm in trouble. So I get people away from that idea of like thinking about neck and upper back and low back and just thinking about a spine. And that if I'm looking, then everything follows and everything goes up.
So you have some clients that do Alexander natural vision work, some clients that do Hellerwork, some clients that do both. What are some of the things that you notice with those that do both versus those that just do one or the other?
I have a gentleman who has Parkinson's disease. And what he does is he comes for a lesson 2 weeks in a row, and then he gets body work. Am I curing Parkinson's? No, but he can still move, and he stands up beautifully considering the fact that he has Parkinson's. So in an ideal world, people always say, well, if I had unlimited funds and I could do anything I want, what would I do? And it's like, you do a lesson a week for 2 weeks in a row, and then you'd have a body work session. But what I really like to do is I really like to have people do the body work, get the series, and then work on lessons to get them moving differently so they don't get back into the situation that they came in. But I think it's really important to free up the fascial layers first, and I've, everything I've read and seen my whole career, Ida Rolf really developed the series that I use, and I still use it, and I still think it's just brilliant. And so, getting the length of the muscles going, getting the muscles off the bone, getting people ideas already of how to move and keep what they have is my first step. And then I'm always trying to talk people into lessons. And I don't separate the vision lessons and the Alexander lessons, because the visual pathway supports the structure and the structure supports the visual pathway. So if you're going to do natural vision work, we have to really get you moving in such a way that you can use your eyes differently. And if you come in because you have a structural problem and you want lessons, we can't skip the visual work. I mean, they're the same thing. So all of my students get vision work. All of my students get movement work. All of my vision people get movement work. And so, but my first thing to tell them is get a series. If you can get a series, get a series. Unfortunately, though, one of the things that I found is people who love body work don't want to do the movement thing, and people who love the movement thing are no, I just, I really like my lessons. I get so much out of them, blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of hard. But in a situation where my student has Parkinson's and he's come for a long time, and, he really can spend his money on that, because there are, having Parkinson's, it limits a lot of, what he does. So he'd be a good example. And I'll tell you, Parkinson's, Alexander's fabulous for people who have Parkinson's and a lot of those nervous disorders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really, hi girl, I schnauzer.
Come on, he can sit there with you.
Let's see if we can get her in. Oh, there. Well, she's blurred out. One thing I really like too that you touched on, that I've heard from a couple different people, but it was really well put, as kind of the impacts, not just of the baby furniture, but what happens if you put on braces while a child is developing, if you put glasses on somebody while they're developing, and and the impacts that can have if
It
you
does.
put a
Yeah.
structure on that either might not be needed, or you put a structure on and then you just keep getting better and better prescriptions rather than working
Yeah.
with the structure.
Oh,
So
well, I wouldn't say better and better prescriptions, because what they do is get stronger and stronger.
yeah,
And that's
okay.
like, and you're shutting your eyes down more and more and more. And I think children, I think it's really important early on. So I'm not saying all children. Okay, there are kids who actually need glasses, but probably very few. And actually, my vision teacher, Peter Gunvald, had like the Coke bottle glasses when he was little, and later on in his life worked his way out of glasses. But kids, you really really want to leave them alone again, and even see. I don't think they should be testing. This is opinion here, that they should be testing them so young. And if they don't see well, they should be just moved closer to the blackboard or whatever. But what kids do need to develop their vision is to rocking, rolling, hopping, skipping, roughhousing, and unstructured play. And getting them out there and swimming in the ocean, any kind of unstructured play, and give them a chance for their vision to develop. And kids all develop at a different time. And one of the problems with this testing thing is that vision is very organic. So what that means is that, if you had a wonderful weekend and everything you did worked right, and you got up on Monday morning, your eyes are pretty good. But if you had a terrible week and it's Friday and now you're going to go in and have your eyes tested, you're not going to get the same test that you would if you had gotten up after a wonderful weekend and relaxed and things just went your way, because it's very organic. So it would depend on what time of day you were tested. It's like the testing is not everything. And so, I encourage people who call me about their kids, and I'll tell you who calls me about their kids. It's not Americans. It's usually people from other countries who use more natural medicine. And like even the American guy who called me about his daughter because she was up on her toes, I mean, he grew up in Mexico City. We tend to use more allopathic medicine, and we trust that kind of stuff. But when they call me, it's like I usually say, just give them a chance, take the glasses off and give them a chance. But I guess my biggest thing is the sunglasses thing, especially for kids, because you don't want to shut the retina down, and that's what it does. And then you need darker and darker and darker glasses, and you really want the eye to function the way it's designed. But for kids, later on they can, and the sad thing about it is this is $1 billion business, this glasses business. And for adults, as far as like natural vision and stuff, I think that that you have to be interested in learning something and learning how to reuse your visual pathway and reuse your visual cortex. For kids, you let them go out and play and walk and put them in a swing them. Swinging is fabulous. I was trying to think of all the things that you could do, but just, some woman called me and she wanted to bring her child, and I said, my God's sake, just get them to a playground. Get them on a swing, get them going down the slide, get them rolling around. And nowadays, when I see these playgrounds for kids, they're really creative, and it's very different than what we just had, the swing set and the slide. They have things like nets that they can climb in and tunnels, and that's the kind of stuff they need. And then much later on, you can, if they still need some help, glasses.
That's what I want.
We're lucky we have them, but we're not using them the way they're designed.
That's what I want for my doctor practitioner to say, I need some help. Go play on a playground.
Yeah. Go get the swing.
I'm just looking at my questions because we've had fun talking, but I wanted to make sure. So I did want to expand a little, because when I read this, and we touched on it before, but what is brain gym?
Brain gym. Oh gosh, okay, that's a really good question. You can look it up online and you will find brain gym and brain gym practitioners. I think my favorite practitioner is Dr. Carla Hannaford, and they work with kids who have learning disabilities, and they do it through movement. They do it through visual movement too, and they're very much interested in the audio. So they're, you'll find information about Tomitis and um, uh, uh, mm, I'm trying to think of the other.
Start procedures?
No,
No.
but that's okay. But go and look it up. And basically, they can work one-on-one with kids. And I think it started from patterning is one of the things, back in the 80s, I would hear about, patterning for kids. And what they do is they take them physically one-on-one through certain movements to help them for learning disabilities, I think generally is what it is. And Dr. Carla Hannaford wrote a book about dominant eye, dominant ear, dominant foot, and she studied brain dominance. And so they would test these kids. This is a brain gym thing. They would test these kids for different dominance, and according to that dominance, that's how they would teach them. That's how they would put them in a room in a school. So if you're, and then so brain gym, they used testing, the muscle testing. I'm trying to think of all the elements of it, but it's just so inclusive that it's hard to describe brain gym other than that they really understand the senses and how it wakes up the brain and how it helps these kids who have ADD and auditory processing problems and things like that. But then you can also use it for, for kids who have nervous disorders. And that's actually Dr. Raymond Dart, he was an anthropologist and a doctor and a bunch of other things that I can't even list here. But he had a son who was brain damaged. And because he understood early developmental movement, he started using that to help his brain damaged son, and then took those movements, which, he didn't develop those are, early developmental movements, but put them into a series called the DART procedures. And you can look up DART procedures too. But brain gym is very encompassing in a lot of different areas. But if you read Dr. Carla Hannaford's work, Awakening the Child's Heart, or any of their literature, you'd be really impressed. And that's how I hooked up with the neurokinesiology, because she's a Russian teacher who worked with brain gym and, for kids who have palsy. And so anyhow, but at the end of the day, we're working with the nervous system and fight or flight. Almost all of these things are that you're locked into a fight or flight through some kind of trauma. That's what made me think of that. My Russian teacher used to work with big accidents in Russia, like one of the big train accidents, and would help people who had been traumatized, because you're stuck into a fight or flight, and help them come out of that, and then extended it into other kinds of work. I think she was at Chernobyl too. And I have her book listed in my book.
Yeah, I really liked how you talked about, especially like the clenching of the jaw or the clenching of the fist, and it just started to put a lot together as forms of like, well, what's like shortening and tightening, and what state of being is the nervous system in, versus when you talk a lot like of lengthening and opening.
Right.
And
And
that's
you can't be in a fight or flight and and allow the muscles to lengthen and widen, because that's actually what fight. I wrote a paper years ago. It might still be on my website. I don't look at my website very often, but it's the physiological effects of trauma. And in the physiological effects of trauma, the eyes change, how we hear changes. We usually change ear dominance. The muscles shorten and tighten. A lot of that low back stuff is just fetal for protection. And so basically at the end of the day, I'm always working with the nervous system, and I'm always helping people to calm down and come out of fight or flight, and then how to stay out of fight or flight.
This is just something I'm really curious about, but
Okay.
when you're working, I know you have so much training and so much background. When you're working with somebody, either hands-on or hands-off, what are you listening to? What is important for you to tune into? What are the things that show up? Like, what is the silent dialogue that's going on for you as a practitioner?
Well, because I'm trained as an Alexander teacher, from the time I see someone, I'm already looking at the structure and understanding what's going wrong. But then when I get somebody on a table and I'm putting my hands on certain areas, I can feel where it's I can see where it's tight and short. I mean, I visually can see where a body's tight and short. And then I confirm it by getting my hands in there when I'm doing a Hellerwork session and see, yeah, it's all stuck here. And my job, again, but the difference probably between Heller workers who are trained and don't have the Alexander aspect is that I'm always doing what we call in Alexander the directions. So it's very specific directions, and then I added the rotations to that material, and I'm always trying to take an area back into its more normal position, and then seeing what happens. And on someone, like I work on someone who's in his 90s, and I actually don't take his leg back into position because it's been there for 90 years or something like that. But I do the best I can to get that lengthened out, regardless of the fact that this thing has pretty much calcified into his body, and then give him ideas about how to use himself better. But I'm always tracking. I don't know how to not track anymore. I'm tracking everything. And I have someone coming in today, and because all of because she's in her 80s and she's got a bad back and she wants some lessons, I'm going to do very little. I'm going to just do very little with her, because if I can get one idea across and it improves something, she'll stick with it. If she finds one thing there, and the best thing I can do is to like back off, because I see everything. It's like, oh, let's fix it. Let's fix all this, right? And just back off and try and give her one or two things that help her in the moment. And then she'll come back and do more.
I love that.
It's hard to back. It's hard to back off. Back off.
Do you find that brings a lot more empowerment to your clients?
Yeah, it's much better. It really is, because someone walks into your office and you're looking at this and it's like, okay, I got to fix this, I got to fix that. It's like, oh my gosh, and it's like, no. I mean, actually, in the first couple lessons or first couple sessions, it's like, let's find out if we like each other, because things go better when we like each other.
Yeah.
And and that in and of itself brings people back. If they like you, then they're like, okay, well, she seems to know something, let's try this.
There might be trust involved.
Yeah.
So the last thing I wanted to touch on, just because I think it's an interesting part, is that toward the end of your book, you give a lot of kind of things to consider, or how exercises to do, and a big one is laying on the ground.
Up on a chair.
Yeah.
Something for the skull. I went back and forth about writing remedies.
Yeah.
Because remedies will work for a while, but they're not gonna completely do it. I mean, it's like if you're headed for trouble, remedies are like help you stay functional in the moment. And then I thought, well, what about someone who lives somewhere that there's absolutely no Alexander teacher, or there's no Heller workers, or they just are never going to have the money to come in and like do something like that. So let's throw out the remedies, the things that you can do for yourself right now. And if you do them on a regular basis and you follow those things, that you can help yourself a lot.
Mhm.
And so that's why I put the remedies in there. But I didn't make anything like, oh, and this is all you need to do, because that's generally, what happens. You tell somebody, well, those shoes that you have in your feet aren't working for you, and they change it and it works, and they think, oh, well, that's the magic bullet. And it's not. We know it's not the magic bullet, that it takes a whole lot more than that. But again, I wrote it for people who are never going to be able to like have contact with a body worker, something like that.
Well, I think that's great. And I like it for me as a body worker. It's been very inspiring for
Yeah.
me to learn more about especially the senses and the impacts on the structure, and kind of putting all of those pieces together. So I think this is a lovely place to end. So I
Okay.
want to thank you so much. I so appreciate your beautiful melting pot of knowledge and how you put it together in your book, and to let people know just to check out your website. It is
Right.
going to
And I will
be
get it up. It's written. It's ready to go. I just got to get it published, and I will get something up on the website so that people can get the book and have it.
wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Greer. Thank you.